Hey everyone, Chris Timm here from Sandela Consulting. In this video, I'm going to talk about how we can implement an account stop process in Halo. So, let's say, for example, our customer doesn't pay. We want to mark that customer as on stop, and then we want to automatically have a note being added to that customer to say that they're on stop. And then when they come off stop, so they've paid the bill or whatever reason we need to take them back off the stop, we can then have that note automatically removed as well. Now, one of the really good things about Halo at this point, Halo allows us to automate a lot of these processes directly through the product. So we're not having to use any third-party tools to do this. And that's where really the power of runbooks come in Halo. So in this video, I'm going to explain that process and how we would actually do this. So let's look at our customer in here. We have our customer of Caron Properties, and then in here we can see we have a note that is already saying, this is a customer, don't invoice, whatever the case might be. So we can have these as pop-up notes under the settings tab within Halo. We can also see here that on the account status that this account is marked as allowed. So everything at this point is there's no stop, this customer's good, all of that kind of stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to simply edit this customer and we're going to change the status to stopped. We're going to click on save. And what this will do in a couple of seconds is this will go ahead, it will run our runbook for us, and it will automatically add a note to this ticket, a pop-up note to say that this customer is on hold. So if we now go back into our settings, and I never know where I'll hide my settings tab, there it is, go to pop-up notes, I can now see that the client is marked as stop. For some reason my runbook's giving it to me twice. I need to check that, but nonetheless we now have the ability to have this customer on stop. So for example, if we then came into here and we created a ticket for this customer, what we should see is the customer status is set to stopped. So it does flag up and tell us that. It tells us down here as well. Okay, so what we can then do is, let's say for example this customer then is now good, they've paid the bill. We're going to come back in here and we're going to mark this process, or we're going to mark this customer, I should say, back as allowed. And when we save this, we're going to look at our settings tab, we should see in a few minutes, it probably takes a little bit of a time, jumps off that tab, we have to keep going back to it, and if we go into settings under pop-up notes, we can see that those notes have disappeared, but we haven't removed the note that was already there. So this is really an important part of this integration. Is what it's going to do is it's going to go and actually add any notes that it needs to, any other pop-up notes, but when it removes those notes, it's going to preserve the ones that are there already and not go ahead and delete those notes. So let's take a look at the runbook that actually does this. So the very first thing we do in the runbook is we come into here and we can see that we are initiating this runbook, or starting this runbook if you like, based upon a customer being updated. So that customer updated is when we then click on that edit button and we change the status of this customer into allowed. What it'll then do is it starts to trigger this runbook, and it comes through a series of steps. So the very first thing it's going to do is check that ticket, or check the customer I should say. It's then going to come in here and check to see if the customer has been marked as stop. So the stop, or on hold as I'm calling it, is equal to 1. So it's coming in here and it's saying if it's equal to 1, in other words it is stopped, then it goes through this condition met. So it checks to see if there's already a pop-up note on the system, and if there is already a pop-up note, then it says it's got a pop-up note, and it then ignores it. So in other words, it's got a pop-up note already saying that meeting that condition. If it hasn't been met, in this case it then adds the hold pop-up note to check that the customer is it goes and adds that note. So the first one up here says if that hold note already exists, then come up here and end the process. If it doesn't exist, so it doesn't already have something to say that it's on hold, if it's been marked as stopped, it then comes into here and it goes and adds that note to the array. It then adds the actual pop-up note action And then what that does is we can see, if we look at our action, we're simply coming in here and we're we're adding into the pop-up notes from whatever we had in our array before. Then all we can do back in here, let's just come back out of here. Oops. What we can do is let's go back into our integrations. Yeah, so it comes in here and it basically just goes through and has a look at and adds that note and then finishes the process at this point. So what we then do is we say back here is if the condition is stopped, so in other words, in this case, the customer is not stopped, so it's been changed back to a process that is allowed, or it's just on allowed to start with. It then checks to see if we've already removed that condition. If we have, it then comes up here and says we don't need to do anything more. If we haven't, it runs some SQL commands basically to go and check again to see what's inside that array and whether we can actually go ahead and delete that. It then takes that entire array and posts it back to the customer action, and then we get our successful and end arrays. So this is something that we can really easily build. It looks super complicated. It's actually really not. There's probably like 4 or 5 steps. These red ones are kind of ending steps. The white and blue are steps that kind of, these ones, for example, check to see if a condition has happened. If it has, it moves on through the stages. So even though this looks super complicated, it's actually really not. It's a very easy process to build in Halo. But one of the really nice things is we can actually do this automatically built into the product within Halo. So I hope that was useful. I know a bunch of people have already asked me for this kind of thing, and it is something that we can very easily, as I said, very easily put together in Halo. If this is something you're interested in, some kind of integrations and automations, I'm always happy to have a conversation, happy to chat. And thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. And if you do find any value out of these, I really would appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It does really kind of help the YouTube algorithm and it kind of helps these videos to get noticed a little bit more. So appreciate it. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you on the next video.